This is the brand new Garmin Instinct AMOLED, and this is the brand new Garmin Instinct Solar. I've been using both these watches for the past couple of weeks, putting them through their paces in both my everyday life and all of my outdoor activities. The Instinct series from Garmin has always been their rugged, outdoor-inspired watch for outdoor enthusiasts like hikers, backpackers, but it's grown a lot in popularity due to its distinctive design, and at this point it's got its own sort of cult following. And Garmin has recognized that popularity and added a boatload of new features over the past couple of years to accommodate more activities than just that outdoorsy stuff. This makes these watches way more capable, and you can sort of think of the new Instinct 3 as sort of like a Garmin Forerunner in a more rugged case, if that makes sense. However, the Instinct 3 is pretty unique because it's one of the newly released sport watches on the market right now that's still sporting an MIP or memory in pixel display, where most of the other models from just about every brand out there have ditched MIP in favor of AMOLED. This year though, Garmin is giving you the option with the Instinct 3, offering two different versions. One with a big, bright, vibrant AMOLED display, and one with a monochrome MIP solar powered display, both having pros and cons. So in this video today, I want to talk about all of the new features of these new watches and how they compare to last generation's Instinct 2 and 2X series. We're going to run through lots of test results I've done during my runs with solar, GPS accuracy, heart rate accuracy, and a whole lot more, and give you my opinion on which watch is right for you. Because let's cut to the chase here, these watches might not be right for you. And at the end of this video, I do have sort of a hot take on which one of these watches is the best one to get, so stick around for that. Oh yeah, and one more thing, I'm not going to talk about the Instinct E at all. That's going to be an entirely separate video down the road. This is all about the Instinct 3. Let's lay some groundwork here with options and pricing, because the pricing is going to be something that comes up in discussion quite a bit in this video. Like I said, the new Instinct 3 comes in two different versions with the solar and the AMOLED options, and both these have different price points, with the AMOLED being a little bit more expensive. These watches range starting at $399 for the smaller solar model, and they go all the way up to $499 USD for the biggest AMOLED model. Simply put, these watches are not so much a budget option anymore. They're getting pretty expensive, going up to $499 here in the USA. When it comes to colors available at the time of launch, there's only a couple to choose from. However, I suspect that'll change down the road. In typical Garmin fashion, there'll probably be like a surf edition and tactical edition with all different colors, so stay tuned for that. But for now, you can pretty much only choose from a black or gray color and this new special edition color. On the Instinct 3 solar model, if you do choose this black color or gray color, you will get this orange accent underneath the bezel and on the side of the watch here. If you do go with the AMOLED version, this is like a blacked out kind of look. Now, when it comes to that special edition color, it's sort of like a toothpaste green blue color, which honestly, you're either going to love or hate, and I feel like I land somewhere in the middle on that. When it comes to the look and feel of these watches, they're very similar to the previous generations from the Instinct lineup. For example, here I've got the new Instinct 3 on the right. This is the AMOLED option, 45mm, and then on the left here is last generation's Instinct 2. Now over here on the right, I've got the new Instinct 3 Solar and the Instinct 2X Solar, which is last generation's. And again, between these two watches, they have a very similar looking appearance between their bezels and their shape and their design. And the Instinct 2X here even has the built-in flashlight that the new Instinct 3 has as well. When it comes to the build quality on these watches, they're pretty much entirely made out of plastic. There are some exposed metal screws here, and like I said before, Garmin did add this like little metal shim that goes underneath the bezel here, and that's supposed to give it a little bit more durability and shock resistance. I'm not sure how much more durable it got, but on top of that, I think it also acts as part of the GPS antenna. When it comes to the buttons on the new Garmin Instinct 3, again, very similar to previous generations. They're very large buttons, so they are easy to feel if you're wearing gloves. However, they don't have a ton of travel, so it can be kind of hard to feel when you click them. One huge upgrade to the Instinct 3 lineup is that every watch in the Instinct 3 lineup now has the built-in flashlight. If I double tap the top left buttons here on both watches, even the small one here, you can see they both have the built-in LED flashlight on the side of the watch, and this is super handy. When I first got a watch with this built-in, I thought it was sort of a gimmick, but now that I have it, I use it just about every day for mundane tasks like looking for my keys or navigating around a dark bedroom. With the Instinct 3, it's nice that all models have the built-in flashlight, because in previous generations, only the larger option with the Instinct 2X had the built-in flashlight. And if you were curious about the size of the new Garmin Instinct 3, again, it's pretty similar to previous models, but on the right here, I do have the 45mm form factor. On the left, I do have the 50mm solar form factor, and my wrists are 165mm in circumference. However, the other thing you might notice with the watch is flipped over is the built-in heart rate sensor. The optical heart rate sensor you're seeing here is Garmin's Gen 4 heart rate sensor, which is a really strange choice because they do have a new version of this heart rate sensor dubbed the Gen 5, as you can see here on the Garmin Fenix 8. The new Gen 5 heart rate sensor does have a few advantages. First of all, it is slightly more accurate because it's got more LEDs and light receivers, but on top of that, it's got additional features like skin temperature sensing and ECG built in. Unfortunately, the Gen 4 sensor used on the new Garmin Instinct 3 does not have those features. I don't know why they went with this heart rate sensor. To be fair, it's still a perfectly adequate heart rate sensor, and I've had really good luck with it in previous models like the Garmin Forerunner 965. But still, I would expect in a $500 watch from Garmin to get the latest technology, but that's simply not the case here. When it comes to accuracy from the built-in Gen 4 heart rate sensor, it's pretty much the same as all previous models with this heart rate sensor. Shocker. I'm not gonna waste your time by going through a bunch of graphs and specs about this heart rate sensor because I've reviewed it countless times with the Garmin Forerunner 165, 265, 965, and a ton of other devices. In my history with this heart rate sensor, I've gotten pretty good results. Not the best results, but pretty solid results. And if you weren't comparing this sensor to other sensors side by side like I do, you probably won't complain about it. But again, you will be missing some of those additional features like ECG that you get with the Gen 5 sensor. So that's a quick rundown of the hardware of the new Garmin Instinct 3. But what's more important than the hardware is the display on these watches. Like I said before, you now have the option for an AMOLED display on the Instinct series, which previously just didn't exist. Oddly enough though, the display size will differ depending whether or not you choose solar or AMOLED. If you go with the solar model, you do get a smaller display. Another difference between these displays is that on the Garmin Instinct Solar, you still get that little submarine window in the corner that's like a secondary display. Pretty distinctive look for the Garmin Instinct series. On the new AMOLED version, that little window is gone. So the entire front of this watch is a display. However, Garmin has used software to sort of emulate that little window throughout the user interface, so it kind of still feels like it's there, but it's still all one display. First, let's talk about the AMOLED display on the Garmin Instinct 3. This is a really nice display. It's super high resolution, it's vibrant, it's bright. I'm guessing it's around 1,000 nits of brightness, so it's pretty much okay in any lighting condition, whether it's dim or out in direct sunlight. I've had no issues with visibility on this watch, even out in direct sunlight during a run. Garmin also used a really great glass on this watch. I'm pretty sure it's like a Gorilla Glass or something like that, but it reduces the glare and reflection, so it makes that display look super punchy, as you can see here. Something to keep in mind with the AMOLED version of the Instinct 3 is that there's no solar capabilities on this watch, and that's simply a technical limitation of AMOLED displays. They consume too much power, so it's really not worth putting solar on top of an AMOLED display. And another glaring thing missing from the AMOLED display on the Instinct 3 is that it is not a touchscreen, and this is kind of a big deal. So this might be the only watch on the market right now that has an AMOLED display, but no touch capabilities. In my opinion, the lack of a touchscreen display on the Instinct 3 is a weird choice. I feel like it should be there, but I do know a lot of Instinct users out there, judging by my comments, are really happy that there's no touch screen display. But you do have to keep in mind one thing, and it's that on the Garmin Fenix 8 or a Forerunner, you can actually dive into the settings of these watches and completely disable the touchscreen if you don't want to use it. You can see there I have touch on, and by a simple button click, I've just turned the touchscreen off so I can touch the display and nothing happens. And I do think that's what they should have done with the Garmin Instinct series, just to give you the choice. But that choice is not here, and on what could be a $500 watch if you get the AMOLED 50mm version, that's a very strange choice. Hey there, quick interruption. If you're enjoying this video or finding it useful at all, I would really appreciate it if you head down and give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel down below, because that really helps me out. And then after you do that, also check out the links in the description down below, where you can pick up your very own Garmin Instinct 3 over at my friends playbetter.com, who have great 2-day shipping and a no-hassle return policy. Okay, back to the video. Now that we've talked about that AMOLED display, let's talk about that MIP display on the Solar model, because in my opinion, this is way more interesting than AMOLED. Even though this is sort of the headline of the Instinct series, the MIP display is super interesting. The first thing you'll notice about the MIP display on the Solar model is that yes, it still has that little submarine window in the top right corner, but the second thing you'll notice is just how crispy and punchy the text looks on this display. In my opinion, the Garmin Instinct 3 might have the best memory and pixel display I've ever seen from any watch that I've tested on this channel, and that's quite a few watches. This display is super crispy, and you can view it in just about any lighting condition. Even in dim light, it's pretty easy to read even without the backlight. But when you do bring it out in direct sunlight, that's when this thing really shines, literally. The MIP display on the Solar Instinct 3, when it's in direct sunlight, is pretty much like a reflector. It pretty much glows when the sunlight hits it. It makes it super easy to read. When you're running and you glance down, you can easily see the numbers and text at a glance very easily. I would say even more easily than an AMOLED display. And what's even more impressive is the backlight on this MIP display. So when the lights go down and you do need to see the watch in the dark, this watch does have a backlight, of course, but that backlight, again, is super crispy, and it's not washed out or blue or kind of ugly looking like a lot of older Garmin watches, including the Instinct 2X or the Instinct 2. It's got this really crispy, almost AMOLED-like display characteristic to it. It's almost hard to explain. Hopefully you pick up what I'm saying, and hopefully my camera can do it justice. What's really fascinating about this MIP display though is that in the dark, the backlight is way brighter and more contrasty than previous models. For example, if I set the backlight to 30% on the new Instinct 3 and compare it to 100% on the previous generation Instinct 2X, they pretty much look the same in terms of brightness. And I would say that the Instinct 3 still looks better even at only 30% brightness. The moral of the story is that I honestly can't rave enough about this MIP display. And yes, it's black and white, doesn't have color. It's a MIP display, so it's not super vibrant. It doesn't look like an Apple Watch, but if you're like an outdoorsy trail runner, hiker, climber, that sort of person, I think you're really going to appreciate this. On top of better visibility though, Garmin has also increased the efficiency of the solar panel on the front of the watch considerably. And I've done some unscientific testing to see if it stands up to their claims. For example, I took the new Garmin Instinct 3 and the older Instinct 2X Solar outside to test them out in direct sunlight. I left both of these watches in the same position on the ground, aiming directly up at the sun for an extended period of time, and recorded just how much sunlight they collected. As soon as I set these watches down on the ground, aiming up at the sunlight, I was shocked to see just how fast the Garmin Instinct 3 Solar was collecting sunlight. As you can see here in the video, it just started rapidly accruing lux hours. Keeping in mind, this video is not sped up at all, this is real time. And after just 23 minutes of direct sunlight, the new Garmin Instinct 3 Solar collected 50,000 lux hours of sunlight. And in that same duration of time, the older Instinct 2X collected 32,000 lux hours of sunlight. Skipping forward 1 hour, the Instinct 3 Solar collected 88,000 lux hours of sunlight, while the Instinct 2X Solar collected 59,000 lux hours of sunlight. Judging by this unscientific experiment, it seems like the new Instinct 3 Solar is about 33% more effective than the older Instinct 2X when it comes to their solar capabilities, which is really impressive. But what I think is more important on the Instinct 3 Solar is its ability to collect sunlight at off angles or on cloudy days. So I went for a 2-hour long run out on a cloudy, kind of not so sunny day that was about 15 miles long, and I was in and out of the trees, and it wasn't a good situation for a solar powered watch. To make things worse, the watch was also on my left wrist while I was running south and the sun was setting in the west. So the watch was always on my left side while the sun was on my right side, and again, not a perfect scenario for a solar powered watch. The new Garmin Instinct 3 Solar still collected 33,000 lux hours of sunlight during that run, which again, pretty impressive. I wasn't even aiming at the sun and I still collected a fair bit of sunlight. So you're probably wondering, how does that affect the battery life of the Instinct 3 Solar? Well, it's really good. In some cases, it means you may never have to charge this watch. If you get a lot of sunlight and your everyday life means you're out in the sun for a couple hours a day, you probably never have to charge this thing, which is pretty cool. And we'll talk more on battery life a little later in this video. Now that we've talked about hardware, display, and solar, let's quickly talk about the user interface on the new Garmin Instinct 3, AMOLED, and Solar. There are some differences here. So just by looking at the screens here, if I start to cycle through the widgets, you're going to notice that things look a bit different. And that's simply because the AMOLED model has more colors, more resolution, more brightness to play with compared to a monochrome MIP display. So if I dive into the weather widget on the Solar model and the weather widget on the AMOLED model, you can see there's a lot of differences here. The sun is yellow, I've got a blue raindrop here, and the text is a little bit sharper on the AMOLED display. And these differences carry through on just about every page between these two watches. Things just look a lot more modern and more easier to read and more exciting on the AMOLED model of the Instinct 3. But the AMOLED display on the Instinct 3 also unlocks a few extra capabilities. For example, on this watch, you can increase the font size to a large font mode for people who are hard of vision. And on top of that, there's also Garmin's muscle map for strength training workouts. There's little strength training workout animations. However, other than those nuanced features, there's a whole bunch of new features within the software of both the Solar and AMOLED Instinct 3 models. That includes the updated sleep algorithm with nap detection, sleep coach, you've got the enhanced training load with training load focus and training load ratio. They also added triathlon auto transition support on the Instinct 3, and some of the new social features like Garmin Share and Garmin Messenger are now supported on both models. And finally, one of the most handy features to have on both these watches is that all of the Garmin Instinct 3 models do now support Garmin Pay by default. So you don't have to choose a certain model, they all have Garmin Pay. With that being said, even though they added a bunch of features to these watches, there's still a couple of things missing. For example, on the Instinct 3 series at large, there is no music support. There's no MP3 playback, there's no Spotify, no Amazon Music, nothing like that. However, they do still support phone music controls if you want to control your phone's music from your watch. And on top of that, there's no advanced training metrics like hill score or endurance score. That is still exclusive to the Garmin Fenix E or the higher end Forerunner models. And the final thing that's missing on the new Instinct 3 series, which is probably the biggest thing missing other than the touchscreen, is going to be maps and navigation. These watches are marketed as like outdoorsy type watches for hikers and backpackers, yet there's no maps on these watches. They do still have basic breadcrumb navigation, just like older Instinct models, which means you'll still see a little squiggly line of your path and where you should go, but you won't see any context like points of interest or summits of mountains or water sources or junctions of trails or trail labels. All of that stuff is reserved for the Garmin Fenix series or higher end Forerunners and not on the Instinct series, despite them now having an AMOLED display, which is fully capable of displaying maps. They left that out on this one, which I think is a pretty big miss. For example, looking at the price point here, if you look at something like the Suunto Race S at $349, that watch has maps. The COROS Pace Pro, $349, that watch has maps. The Amazfit Active 2, $99. That watch has maps. Garmin Instinct 3 AMOLED 50mm, $500, no maps. With that being said, the breadcrumb mapping on the Instinct 3 did get a slight upgrade that now it can actually display city names. So if you zoom out, you'll see what city you're in. I don't know the use case there, but at least we have that. With maps and navigation out of the way, let's move on to battery life. And to talk about this, I'm just gonna put a chart up on the screen because there's so many different variables and options to choose from. You can read that for yourself. The main highlight here is that the Garmin Instinct 3 AMOLED model, both the 45 and 50mm versions, have good battery life. It's not mind-blowing, and it's pretty much in line with some of the Forerunner models or Fenix models. It's good, not amazing. The AMOLED model of the Instinct 3 will still easily get you through an ultra marathon or something like that, as long as you're not using the always-on display. Jumping over to the Instinct 3 Solar, though, that's where things get pretty interesting. Because of that enhanced solar functionality, it means in smartwatch mode, you can get unlimited battery life in pretty easy situations. If you spend enough time outdoors, you'll likely never have to charge this watch. And not only is smartwatch battery life impressive on the Solar model, so is GPS on battery life. For example, on the 50mm Solar model, you'll get 60 hours on a single charge in a GPS activity with GPS only mode. And if you do get 3 hours of sunlight, you can get up to 260 hours, which is a really long time to be out on activity. And of course, keep in mind, there's a lot of variables with solar models with the cloud cover and off angles and weather and stuff like that. But generally, the battery life numbers I'm seeing here represent what I've been seeing in my testing so far. And I'm really impressed with the battery life of the Solar Instinct 3. With battery life out of the way, let's talk about GPS modes and accuracy for a second here. Again, this is kind of like beating a dead horse because I'm pretty sure the internal chipset for GPS and the antenna design is pretty similar to other models like the Garmin Fenix E here, but we'll still talk about it anyways. The nice thing about the Garmin Instinct 3 is that all models now have Sat IQ on board. And what that means is that yes, these are multi-band devices, so there's kind of like the gold standard in terms of accuracy for watches, but they also have Sat IQ, which will automatically select different satellite modes depending on your environment, which can improve accuracy and save you battery life. And when I compare the accuracy to other test devices I've been using, they're pretty much spot on and in the same ballpark as something like the Garmin Fenix 8 or the Forerunner 965 or 265, just about any other multi-band enabled watch from Garmin with Sat IQ. So there's not a whole lot to discuss here. Just know the GPS accuracy looks pretty good from my experience so far. Okay, that brings us to the final segment of this video. Final thoughts and conclusions with my experience of the Garmin Instinct 3 series so far. What do I think about them? Should you grab them? Let's talk about it. These watches are really nice and they're more versatile than ever because Garmin has now included more wellness and training metrics like training load focus and sleep coach and all of that new stuff and new algorithms that make these a lot more functional and more versatile. It's also really nice that there are options now for those who want a bigger watch or a smaller watch or even an MIP display versus AMOLED display. At least there's options now. And I know it gets a little bit confusing when you're looking at the website, but I do appreciate the fact that you can choose what watch you want. I think if you're a longtime fan of the Instinct series, or if you're a fan of something like a Casio G-Shock, but you do want more fitness and wellness tools and way more functionality, then these watches are the way to go. However, if I were to be critical, and that's kind of my job here, it all really boils down to the price and some of the missing features. For example, the 50mm AMOLED model of the Instinct 3 is $499. It lacks a touchscreen, it lacks mapping, it lacks internal music storage, and some of those advanced training metrics. On top of that, the AMOLED model doesn't have mind-blowing battery life. It's good, but it's not crazy. And if you took that same $499, you could also go out and purchase something like the Garmin Forerunner 965. And that adds all of those things, mapping, music, touchscreen. On top of that, it also has pretty similar battery life and the same heart rate sensor for the same money. On the flip side, at the time of filming this video, you could run out and buy the Garmin Epix Gen 2 with sapphire and a titanium bezel for $449 on sale. And that watch has a premium build and sapphire display and touchscreen and music and mapping and all the capabilities for $50 less than a 50mm Instinct 3. Don't get me wrong, I really do like the AMOLED version of the Instinct 3. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's just tough at that price with so many other options from Garmin on the market. And that's a long-winded way to bring us to my hot take and the title of this video, the Garmin Instinct 3 Solar. If you're going to buy an Instinct 3, I highly suggest going for the Garmin Instinct 3 Solar. This watch is really the only unique watch in the lineup with the incredible MIP display that's super easy to read and very visible, a great backlight, insane battery life, and much improved solar capabilities. Yes, still no mapping functionality, no music, anything like that, but if you're looking for an Instinct, this is still an Instinct, where I feel like the AMOLED model, it's kind of leaning towards that Forerunner Fenix crowd and not so much being an Instinct anymore. I'm kind of rambling now, but I hope you get what I'm saying. And this conclusion is honestly kind of foreign to me because I'm someone who really appreciates an AMOLED display. But after trying and testing out the new Solar Instinct 3, specifically the 50mm version here, I've really enjoyed my time with it and the display is so good. It's kind of hard to go back to the AMOLED display. Even though it's black and white, it's just super functional and I've really enjoyed it. So yeah, that's my hot take and my opinion. But I'm just some guy on YouTube, and now's the point of the video where I want to hear from you. Are you interested in the Garmin Instinct 3? Are you gonna go out and get one? Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you. And after you're done commenting down there, also make sure to check out the links in the description down below where you can head over and grab your very own Garmin Instinct 3 Solar or AMOLED or any other watch I talked about in this video. And after you're done shopping, also check out all the other links to my podcast, my merch store, my Instagram, my Strava, and all the other things in the description down below. Follow me down there too. And of course, after you do all of that, make sure to go down, give me the thumbs up, subscribe, do all the things. That really helps out my channel, helps it grow, and I will see you in the next one. Okay? Bye.